On the southern plains of the 19th century, there was a full moon so feared that families locked their doors and whispered prayers when it rose. They called it the Comanche moon. Under its cold, pale light, riders moved without sound across hundreds of miles, striking settlements before anyone could run. Those who survived remembered the screams, the fire, and the moment loved ones were torn away. For the women and children taken alive, survival was only the beginning. What followed would force them to endure a fate that blurred the line between brutality and belonging, between slavery and family, and between losing yourself and becoming someone else entirely. When settlers spoke of the Comanche moon, they weren't talking about superstition. They were naming a pattern learned through blood and loss. Raids came with the full moon because its light allowed riders to move fast across open land without torches. Entire families learned to recognize its glow, pale and unforgiving, hanging over the plains like a warning. Behind barricaded doors, they waited, knowing that if the riders came, the night would decide who lived, who died, and who vanished forever. The Comanche dominated an empire of grass and sky that stretched over 250,000 square miles. This land, known as Comancheria, ran from the Arkansas River deep into Texas and New Mexico. No army in North America could match them on horseback. From early childhood, Comanche boys learned to ride almost before they could walk. They could fire arrows with deadly accuracy while hanging from the side of a galloping horse, using the animal's body as a shield. Speed, coordination, and fearlessness made them unstoppable. But Comanche power was not built on warfare alone. It was sustained by an economic system as complex and deliberate as any on the frontier. Raiding was not random violence. It was business. Horses were wealth, mobility, and survival. The Comanche raised vast herds on the plains, but they also stole thousands more from ranches and settlements across Texas and northern Mexico. These animals were traded at distant posts for guns, metal tools, cloth, and luxury goods that reinforced Comanche dominance. Human captives became part of this same system. By the early 19th century, the Comanche understood something their enemies did not. People could be worth more alive than dead. A white captive might bring hundreds of dollars in ransom, a fortune in a world measured in horses and buffalo robes. Traders who spoke Comanche negotiated patiently, knowing desperate families and governments would pay again and again. This system hardened as disease tore through the tribe. Smallpox and cholera arrived with European contact and returned in waves, killing thousands. Women suffered miscarriages at devastating rates. Children died before reaching adulthood. Captives, especially young ones, became replacements for the dead. They filled camps with labor, strengthened families, and in time, became Comanche themselves. As raids intensified, whole regions of northern Mexico were emptied. Villages vanished. Roads fell silent. By the time American soldiers marched south in the 1840s, they found a land already broken, not by armies, but by riders who came with the moon. For those taken alive, the first hours of captivity were often the most terrifying. The shock of sudden violence gave way to a forced march north, deeper into Comancheria, away from everything familiar. Survivors later recalled riding for days without rest, bound to saddles, watching the land stretch endlessly ahead, while the smoke of their former homes faded behind them. One of the most infamous raids occurred in May of 1836 at Fort Parker, a small fortified settlement on the edge of Comanche territory. The families there believed the walls would protect them. That confidence proved fatal. When warriors appeared at the gates, painted for war, and riding openly toward the fort, there was no time to react. A brief attempt at negotiation ended in bloodshed. The fort fell within minutes. 5 settlers lay dead, and 5 captives were carried away into the plains. Among them was Rachel Parker Plummer, pregnant and terrified, torn from her family along with her young son. With her were 2 children, including 9-year-old Cynthia Ann Parker, whose life would become one of the most complex captivity stories in American history. That first night, Rachel later wrote, shattered her completely. She could not bring herself to describe what was done to her and the other women, only saying that to speak of it would deepen her pain. In an era when silence was often the only language allowed to women, that omission spoke louder than detail. Rachel remained captive for nearly 2 years. During that time, she gave birth in a Comanche camp, surrounded by strangers, and watched constantly. When her infant was still only weeks old, the warriors decided the child slowed the group during travel. The loss was immediate and final. Rachel survived, but something essential inside her was destroyed. When she was finally ransomed and returned to her family, her story spread across Texas, then the United States, and eventually Europe. Readers were horrified and fascinated, yet Rachel herself would not live long enough to see the full impact. Less than a year later, she died from complications related to childbirth, her body unable to recover from what captivity had done to it. 2 years after Fort Parker, another girl's suffering would ignite a chain of events that reshaped relations between Texas and the Comanche. 13-year-old Matilda Lockhart was captured from her family's settlement and held for nearly 2 years. When Comanche leaders brought her to San Antonio to negotiate ransom, those present were stunned. Her body bore scars from repeated abuse. Her face was badly burned. Her hair had been forcibly removed. She was so weak she could barely raise her head. Matilda told Texas officials that many other captives remained in Comanche camps and that they were being ransomed, slowly, one by one, for profit. The Texans demanded all captives be released immediately. When the Comanche leaders explained that no single chief controlled all the bands, the talks collapsed. Soldiers attempted to seize the Comanche delegation as hostages. Fighting erupted inside the council house and spilled into the streets. By the end, dozens of Comanche men, women, and children lay dead. The response was swift and devastating. That summer, a war leader known as Buffalo Hump united multiple bands into a massive retaliatory raid. Hundreds of warriors swept across Texas, burning settlements, taking captives, and looting towns. At the coastal settlement of Linville, they found warehouses packed with goods meant for trade. Warriors rode through the flames wearing silk hats and carrying umbrellas, trophies of a world they were destroying. It was revenge, spectacle, and economic warfare rolled into one. For women and children who survived the raids, captivity did not follow a single path. Adult men were rarely spared, but women entered a world defined by labor, status, and adaptation. Life in Comanche camps revolved around the buffalo. Hides had to be scraped, meat cured, lodges raised and taken down, water hauled, wood gathered. Captive women were folded into this work immediately. Some were beaten and controlled through fear. Others learned quickly that survival depended on reading the moods and customs of the people around them. Rachel Parker Plummer's experience revealed a harsh truth about Comanche values. After months of abuse, she finally fought back against a woman who struck her. She expected death. Instead, the violence stopped. Courage mattered more than submission. From that moment on, she was treated differently, not free, but no longer disposable. In Comanche society, worth was proven, not assumed. Children faced an entirely different fate. Young captives were often adopted by families who had lost children to disease or war. These adoptions were real, not symbolic. Children were renamed, dressed, taught the language, and raised as sons and daughters. Many forgot their original families entirely. They learned to ride, hunt, and survive on the plains. Boys trained as warriors. Girls learned women's work and the skills needed to endure a hard life. When they grew up, they married within the tribe, often believing themselves fully Comanche. No story captures this transformation more completely than that of Cynthia Ann Parker. Taken at 9, she was raised as a Comanche girl named Nata. Over the years, traders and officials repeatedly tried to ransom her. Each time, she refused. By the time she was grown, she had married a respected warrior named Pita Nokona and built a life she did not wish to abandon. She bore children, worked beside other women, and belonged to the tribe in every way that mattered. When Texas Rangers attacked her camp in 1860, they believed they were rescuing a captive. To Cynthia Ann, it was another abduction. Her husband was killed. She and her young daughter were carried back to white society, a place that now felt alien. She struggled to remember English. She mourned in Comanche ways, cutting her skin and wailing for the family she had lost. Her daughter died a few years later. Her sons remained beyond reach on the plains. She lived on, isolated and grieving, never truly returning to the world she had been born into. Other captives experienced moments of kindness that complicated the horror. Bianca Bab, taken as a child, was adopted by a Comanche woman who treated her gently and tried to help her fit in. Bianca later remembered joy, play, and a sense of belonging, even as sudden violence lurked at the edges of daily life. When given the choice to return home, she did not hesitate. Neither did her brother. For them, captivity became a memory, not an identity. When the Comanche were finally forced onto reservations in the 1870s and ordered to release their captives, many faced an impossible choice. Some wanted to stay. Their spouses, children, and sense of self were Comanche. Being returned to white society felt like a second captivity, a tearing away from everything they knew. These stories resist simple judgment. The Comanche system of captivity was brutal, calculated, and devastating to frontier families. Yet it also absorbed outsiders so completely that some could not imagine another life. Women and children lived between terror and belonging, between survival and loss. Their experiences reveal the human cost of a violent frontier, where cultures collided and identities were remade under unimaginable pressure. In the end, their stories force a question that still lingers. If your world vanished and another replaced it, at what point would survival become belonging? And who would you be when the past could no longer be reclaimed?